I want to go back a little bit to how you got into the mushrooms in the first place, because I think in the mainstream culture, there's always this stereotype of it's like white hippies, new age, doing these psychedelic trips. You don't hear a lot about the black experience with psychedelics. And I want to know if you can tell us just a little bit more about, what got you to nerd out on it, and kind of if you have some sort of perspective on what, like, maybe some of the black experience with psychedelics has been in Oakland, at least locally amongst your people there.
Uh, yeah, it's been frankly pretty lonely until I got to Oakland. In terms of having a diversity of culture. Um, I got into mushrooms in Washington D.C., which ironically is one of the blackest cities in the country. Um, I, I am a hip hop head, and um, I reluctantly. It's crazy how life works. I reluctantly listened to this artist named Eminem, because I'm not just listening to some white rapper, but I it was impossible to get around the fact that Eminem is one of the greatest rappers to ever live, period. And um, so I got drawn into his music. He has this he has a song, I think it's called My Fault, or I'm sorry, but it's about giving some chick mushrooms at a party. And that song piqued my interest. And then um, I'm reading through the DMV, the driver's manual, learning how to drive. And there was this whole section of my handbook about hallucinogens. And, mushrooms was in there too. And so I got a double whammy. I just became very curious about the mushrooms and about hallucinogens. Fun fact that most people don't know, nutmeg. Nutmeg is a very, very powerful hallucinogen. And they listed nutmeg in that book. I fucked around and took a bunch of nutmeg and was out of here um, for like a day. It was crazy. It was just
Nice,
nutmeg is the
nice.
strongest drug I ever took in my life. But
Well,
I digress. Um,
thank God.
Nutmeg is strong. Nutmeg is strong. Um, so
You gonna see
so
Love
in
duck
the,
out into the kitchen in a minute there.
I mean, I didn't. I encourage people to experiment carefully, but clear a whole day if you do it. Nutmeg, you'll recover, but nutmeg is fucking powerful. But so in DC, I became curious. My curiosity led me to finding a really good connection to the mushrooms. And, from about the age of 16 all the way through college, like I said, when I dropped out and moved to Europe, um, I was selling mushrooms. And I wasn't one of these black people that um doesn't hang around black people. I had a very healthy friend group of black people. I had a very healthy friend group of non-black people. Um, but none of the black people were into the mushrooms at all, really. Very well, I can count on half a hand the ones that were into it. But all of my white friends were into it. They loved it. The first people I took mushrooms was with the white boys. The people who I sold the mushrooms to was the white boys, and I couldn't get enough because they couldn't get enough. And this was how it was through my entire life until 2019. And when I
Hmm.
got here to Oakland, um, I jumped out there. And again, the only people who I was really connected with initially um, were non-black people. But the good thing about Oakland, and a good thing about this time is that it was out there. And um, when I started going to meetings of groups like Decriminalized Nature, they were mainly white groups. But within those groups, there was tightly knit black folks that, I connected with. I remember the first Decrimination meeting I ever went to. I went and it was an amazing meeting. If I think to the people who was in the room right now, it was a powerful room. But the people who I went out of my way to connect with, were 3 black people sitting in the corner in the back of the room. And, my girlfriend at the time was Mexican, and I looked at her and I'm like, "I need to go meet with those people." And she says, "Well, why? Why do you why do you need to go meet with those people?" I was like, "It's the only black people in the room. I gotta know them. Everybody else I'll get to, but these people I gotta know." And they're still friends to this day, these people. But from meeting these people, they pulled me into what's grown and blossomed into, frankly, probably the most beautiful community that I've been a part of in my adult life, I gotta say. These are people who are now they're therapists, they're community workers, they're psychologists, they're theologians. Um, there's just all sorts of really good black people who have a respect and a reverence um for black people and psychedelics. Um, and I thank God for this community because operating in the world that I operate in, I am a pro-black person operating in this space that there aren't a lot of black people, and a lot of people don't feel comfortable having conversations about race, and I do. Um, and without these people, the white community that I become a part of would have canceled me a long time ago. They'd have got me up out of here, because they would have known that I'm on an island. And so if you're on an island and they hold the gates to letting you in or closing you out, the minute you start that black shit, they don't want to hear it. Get the fuck out of here.
Mm.
I've had several people tell me, mushrooms don't see color. I'm like, all
Well,
right.
I don't believe that any drug can change the substance of these people, of the core of people. I went to I first heard of you because you did an event in my neighborhood in like 2023 in downtown LA by the Arts District. I think you were on the other side of the
Mhm.
river, so maybe it was Boyle Heights. But I was struck because I've been to so many cannabis events and they didn't have the kind of diversity they had. Because my experience, my psychedelics guru is a Jamaican man, but generally I've had the experience that you've had, and I wonder, number one, I wonder how you cultivated that diversity. It felt like it looked like the city of Los Angeles, and some of the events I heard that you were putting on up there involving like specifically black people. Can you tell me about those
Yeah.
things?
Yeah. In in the work that I did in between, me dropping out of college and now, it was a lot of community organizing work, a bunch of it, between issue-based community organizing and political organizing for campaigns. So organizing people is second nature to me. Sometimes I become exhausted with it, but I can't help it. And I told you I'd be going to those decriminalized nature meetings, and I'd see these events, none of which resonated with me, but I still went so that I could meet people and learn about the community. But the shit was just stale to me. And
Why?
then,
Why?
um, because it didn't resonate, it wasn't culturally relevant for me. Um, but during the pandemic, I couldn't tell you the exact year, maybe 2020, maybe 2021. Um, I went to Detroit to a conference called the Detroit Psychedelic Conference. And there's a black man named Baba Kalindi, who is well known in the mushroom space as being a high dose champion. Paul Stamets wrote about Kalindi in his most recent book. I humble brag. I just so happen to make a little section in Paul Stamets' most recent book as well. I'm very proud about. But he wrote about Kalindi, and Kalindi was out of Detroit, but traveled the world way before I ever did it. He was holding it down, pretty much him and a dude named Darren LeBaron and a dude out of
Yeah,
UK and
yeah.
a dude named Mudu Baki, also out of Detroit. But these were like his students and him, and he traveled the world, pretty much representing black people. And so he died, and he died in the midst of planning his conference. And his wife, Mama Ayana, um, was conflicted. Do I go ahead and do this? You know, Committee died of COVID or died of COVID complications. Uh, do we do this or do we not do this? And she decided to do it. I was one of the people during COVID where I didn't give a damn. I'm not locking down. You know, I'm going to keep working and, you know, I'm going to take advantage of these cheap flights. I'm going to go where I got to go and I'll just wear a mask. So I went to Detroit and I went to this, and that was the first time I saw a psychedelic conference that wasn't lily white, wasn't catered toward whites at all. It was, matter of fact, the total opposite way. And they did those white people there. I remember, I think Paul Stamets like dialed in and did some sort of video sharing, so he wasn't in the room. But like, this was the first time I saw a mushroom conference that was run by Black people, pretty much for Black people, and inspired me to bring that back to the West Coast. And
Mm.
so immediately I got started planning the first Oakland Psychedelic Conference. It took place in 2021. And since I saw it there, I knew I had the connections. I just needed to see it sometimes. You know, sometimes you just need to be this the most simple shit. You just need to see that it can be done. And so then I built on that. And I didn't, you know, I'm not, you know, Mr. All Black everything. I enjoy diverse ideas, diverse perspectives, um, for cultural reasons and for business reasons. You know, you can't, for me, if I limit myself to just Black people, then I limit myself financially. And so what you saw was a nice mix of everybody. Everybody was there. And so um, once I saw it done, I knew that I knew that I had the connections to see what I had there and build on it. And so I built on mainstreaming diverse psychedelic gatherings. And I frankly, I do become upset um, because I can do it easily. I can do it in my sleep. I can do it without having to try. And I've heard every excuse from all these event producers. Now I'm like, they call me and ask me to talk. I'm like, where are the Black people? I'm not going if there's no Black people. I'm not going to be the only one. And well, you know, help me. I don't know where they are. So in 2023, I made a list of 100 people 100 people across the country, across the world, really. And if you need diversity in your shit, you can call these people. It's 100 of them. So you can no longer say you don't, and they still aren't getting it right. So to punctuate the answer to your question, I did it because it was necessary. And I'm actually ashamed that really between me and Detroit, we're the only people who managed to get diversity hit on the
Mm.
head. There was a group in Southern California that called themselves doing some sort of psychedelic gathering, and it was whites and Mexicans, and I'm like,
Mm.
how in LA do you, and you know, there's nothing against whites and Mexicans. I love white people and I love Mexican people, but how do you have a whole thing with nothing with white people and Mexicans and no Black
Mm.
people?
Yeah.
You know, for me, you have to intentionally be doing this.
Hmm. So, you know, I have two questions really. I did the Doc Ellis interview that resulted in the LSD no thing. You know
Yeah,
what I'm
I
talking?
watched that. That was very interesting. Yeah, I watched it.
Yeah. Well, it's like a 90-minute conversation that's cut down into 4.5 minutes. And one of the reasons the doc related to me is because I knew the baseball and I knew the LSD. And just going back to what we were talking about earlier, the LSD, the psychedelic experience as a Black man, a Black person, I should say, can be a lonely one because there aren't a lot of people on it. The first thing I want to ask is what can psychedelics do for Black people? Imagine there's a world where it was available. Are we talking about strictly healing trauma? What do you see in your imaginary future where Black people are fully as equally invested in the psychedelics experience?
Um,
I know that's a big
I
question.
mean, well, I think that movements like what I'm involved with and what you're doing, people coming out the closet and speaking honestly about their experiences helps normalize it. I think that the younger generation coming up after us is going to be less stigmatized. And I kind of understand why a lot of black folks are stigmatized just around drugs, period. If you look at the negative impact that the drug war had, like we didn't have space to really experiment the way that our white
Yeah.
counterparts did. You know, experimentation for us could lead to all sorts of negative impacts. You could lose job opportunities, alter your life forever. You lose just it's actually very interesting. And your question is there. It's in my head, but it's
Mm.
very interesting. Do you know you could commit murder? You can kill a person and still get financial aid. But if you get caught with a dime bag of weed, you can no longer qualify for financial aid. Did you know that?
No, I did not know that. Crazy.
Crazy. They
That's
take away your
ridiculous.
federal money. That's crazy. You can commit murder.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
anyway, um, what I'll say is with the destigmatizing of psychedelics um amongst in the black community, I see tremendous upside. Like I said, a lot of my background was in community organizing, and um, right toward the end of the pandemic, I had this psychedelic therapist friend who, I was very conservative with, am still very conservative with the drugs that I take. It helps that I have my lab so I can test everything for potency and purity. So it takes a lot of that question out of it, and I can dose things properly. But at this time I wasn't there yet, and so I was still having to trust people to help secure the substances and help trust the cleanliness of the substances. And she kept saying, "Yo, Reg, you need to try MDMA. You need to try MDMA." And I'm like, I don't know. I'm scared. I don't know. I'm good on that. Nah, you need to try. You need to try. You need to try it. And so one Christmas, I hate Christmas, and one Christmas she was like, come down to LA and we'll lock in and we'll watch movies and we're gonna do this MDMA." And I was like, I was literally, there's nothing else to do. You can't, I'm not gonna, Christmas can be a lonely fucking time if you're like, I'm on the West Coast by myself. So I flew down there and we watched Home Alone and shit like that. And she breaks out the MDMA, and it's funny, I took it, and I was so scared that I threw it up. I threw it up, but I guess enough got in my system that it was fine. And then, she gave me a booster after a while, and it was just a very good experience once I let go and stopped being scared of the molecule. But I say all this to say the next day afterwards, I remember we went for a walk outside just around the block, and I felt like all that anger that I had to hold on to organize people, I worked with the family of Eric Garner. Do you know who Eric Garner is? I work with the family
New
of
York,
Eric.
the Lucy's guy that got
Yeah,
choked out by the cops. Yes.
yeah, yeah. I work with his family. I work with his daughter on the Bernie campaign. Like I was deep into the Black Lives Matter shit and deep into activism. And, you know, you have to, in order to move people around that, you have to carry so much anger and emotion to do your job right, I'll say. And I just remember the day after I took MDMA, it just felt like for the first time in my memorable history, I was able to just drop my shoulders a little bit, breathe
Hmm.
a little bit, and let go of all that shit.